one of the benefits that I feel like a role in supply chain offers you is visibility to the organization, right? You're oftentimes obviously on the forefront of acquiring products, and you're also on the back end of how the financials work and how it's impacting your costs. And you have to have an end-to-end mindset. And so that visibility is really invaluable in terms of how you acknowledge your position in the business, how you acknowledge the way the organization is performing and things that you can impact.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we hear from the leaders who are driving the future of manufacturing and supply chain innovation. Today, I'm speaking with Mike Matisz, Vice President of Supply Chain at Leaf Home. Now, Leaf Home is North America's largest home improvement company with solutions ranging from gutter protection, water purification, stair lifts, and more. And their solutions are used by over 2 million households. Now, as VP Supply Chain at Leaf Home, Mike oversees the company's supply chain operations, ensuring efficiency and effectiveness. Prior to Leaf Home, Michael was with Jo-Ann Stores, where he held several leadership roles in logistics planning, compliance, and vendor management. Mike, welcome and thank you for joining the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and first get to know you. Can you share your career journey and what brought you to Leaf Home?
Yeah, I started out with Jo-Ann Stores, I think it's back in 2003. And I was working in the distribution center that's actually here in Hudson. And we were doing some facility planning work and some kind of industrial engineering, space planning work in the DC. And the supply chain wasn't really a career choice. It kind of chose me to an extent. My education is in engineering and technology. And so wasn't so much a fan of standing around taking time studies of people. I wanted to get into the business portion of operations. And so I was brought up by some fabulous mentors in the area, logistics and supply chain. They brought me into several roles with Jo-Ann that kind of opened my eyes to other factors, other parts of it. And in 2015, I landed at the doorstep of what was at the time Leaf Filter. It was a small company, but you could feel the motivation and feel the ambition. And so I started with Leaf in 2015 and really haven't looked back. I've experienced significant growth both professionally and with the company.
So can we talk a little bit about the supply chain? Because I'm curious what the supply chain is like for a company like Leaf Home. And also, who is Leaf Home? If you could share a little bit about the company as well.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it a little bit in the intro. We're the largest home remodeling company in North America at this point. We have over 200 locations across varying product lines and brands. So we're aiming to be the consumer's choice for home remodeling in any aspect. And so, when I joined the company, our flagship brand is Leaf Filter, and that was kind of the only thing that we had going at the time. And the supply chain for Leaf Filter was fairly simple. It was a couple vendors and a singular product line, like 12 SKUs, right? So my background in retail supply chain management, I was used to using the tens of thousands and managing planograms and sets and all kinds of different seasonality. This was a dream come true for me. I'm a simpleton somewhat at heart. So when I joined, I was able to, with the support of a lot of folks here, set up inventory management, set up some supplier management, and really kind of build it from there. And the organization experienced some hypergrowth really in COVID. So those first 5 years I was here, prior to COVID, we were opening stores, we were building out national operations, and it allowed me kind of to set the right cadence for my knowledge growth, right, in the industry as well as with the products and materials. And so when we hit the hypergrowth in COVID, we were prepared for it.
Can we talk about that growth? How did you manage it? And on this show too, I should mention, we love to explore technology and the way that technology is influencing businesses, supply chains, manufacturers, these kinds of things. Did technology play a role in supporting your growth, or how did you manage it?
Technology certainly played a role. I mean, like most smaller companies, you kind of start out with the things you can afford. And so we got a warehouse management system that was, I think, $1,000 a year, right? And then we got a transportation management system that was, $50 a month, and it was all online. And we started in those areas, and we kind of learned what we needed through those endeavors and built it from there. I'm not exactly sure how else to do it, to be honest with you. I think even as we experience, system integrations and things that we're doing today, the foundation of our practice was over those initial years where we were kind of playing the cards that we were dealt, right?
So I understand you have a background in manufacturing engineering, like your education and such. How did that influence the way that you look at supply chain?
Well, it gives you a good window into the suppliers that you're working with. I think
Mhm.
you understand kind of their needs as a business, and it's easier to align to some of the things that they request of a partner. And so I try to use that as my approach uniquely with the manufacturing partners is I understand the processes, I understand the equipment, I understand the labor components. And so, I try to take that into account when we're negotiating and we're choosing suppliers.
Yeah, that's great that you're applying it in that way. And so when it comes to manufacturing, right, there's always so much focus on creating efficiency. And so with supply chain, there's often this balance you have to strike, right? When it comes to, with efficiency, removing points of friction, and then with resilience, adding in like contingency plans or secondary options and what if scenarios in case things go wrong. So when it comes to balancing efficiency and resilience, how do you think about that when you're designing your supply chain strategies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, especially the timeliness of it. Obviously, we're dealing with some news on tariffs that seems to change every few minutes. I think it really starts with the partners that you work with. You need to enable them to be really good at what they're doing. And I don't think that you can negotiate them away from their expertise, right? Secondly, I think you have to kind of plan for the business that you're going to do years in advance from a supply chain perspective. We don't get the benefit a lot of times of, you know, seeing the landscape and playing to that landscape on a day-to-day basis. We're dealing with freight contracts that, want to be negotiated on a yearly or biannual basis. We got different manufacturers that want to represent us, but changing all of those things, it takes time, it's expensive. And so you want people to buy into your company, right? When we work with suppliers, we sell them. We want to sell them on what Leaf Home is and what our growth potential is and who we are as a team and the dynamics that we want to have in a partnership. And so that's kind of how you create flexibility. People want to be part of your business, but they're servicing hundreds of other customers. And so how do you get to the front of the line? Well, I really only know one way to do that, and that's by treating them like they're a priority for you, right?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because and it's funny too. I mean, Mike, every time I'm speaking with business leaders, supply chain leaders, manufacturing leaders on this podcast, so often it comes down to not just the technology piece, but it's the people behind it all and those who you're working with. And like you said, you look to them, it sounds like as partners, you want to work with them and like you said, sell them on your business. Can we talk about your vendor management experience? Because I know that was big piece of course, working at Joanne and now at Leaf Home as well. What have been some of the strategies that you've put into place as you've been working with your vendors and like the best way to empower them and to also, create benefits for your business?
I mean, I think I touched on this a little bit already, but we expect them to be experts in the products that they're selling us. Going back to how they drive their origin material supply, what is their flexibility in manufacturing? What is their labor and capacity flexibility at each of their locations or in their national footprint? And we work with a lot of domestic vendors already, right? And you know, one of the realities of our business is that we've grown so much. Some of the suppliers that we're working with, don't have customers as big as us. And so, you're not necessarily selling them on the idea of the volume that we can commit to them. You're selling them on the idea of like, this is a path for growth for their organization. Yeah, you ultimately, you're being transparent with them about the business and the performance and some of the things that from a quality standpoint or an efficiency standpoint, you'd like to see run differently, but you're also hearing from their end, what are things that we're missing in terms of whether it's the products, the way they're being manufactured, the packaging, the carrier partners that we work with. If a carrier comes in and the driver is always rude to the people that are working on the docks, like those are things that matter. And so, we try to be open-minded and transparent with our suppliers, and that's kind of a key for us in all aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Measures of success. What are some ways that you measure the success of the supply chains that you're working on, the supply chain that you lead at Leaf Home?
Yeah, it's easy to measure it based on our growth. I think that one of the things that we try to consider is the growth of the partners that we're working with, right? When we see the businesses that we started working with, opening new facilities, hiring new people, expanding their engineering component, right? What you're kind of doing is creating opportunities for those folks, jobs for people. And that's where I think the success comes from our team, right? Organizationally, we want to sell product. We want to have, customers that come back to us for new products. And so the quality of those components, the makeup of the service that we're providing, there's always a component to the supply base. And so there's success factors kind of littered throughout the process. And we try to look at them all.
That's interesting. And, lead times too. I wanted to ask you about lead times. So, of course, lead times being, how much faster can you get the supplies that you need, right? So what strategies have you seen work really well when it comes to reducing lead times for your customers?
Our business is built on speed. That is exactly how we grew to the location size and the revenue size that we are as an organization, is servicing our customers quickly. And so, you can employ vendor managed inventory strategies. You can have sophisticated forecasting and supply planning, and all that sounds fantastic. When you're planning your business and creating the budget and constraints around that, but common current politics or things that are newsworthy seem to change that on a regular basis. And so you need to have that resilience and flexibility built in. We do employ a carrier base and a distribution network that moves product kind of anywhere in the United States inside of 2 days from our manufacturing plants. And so when you think about selling someone a bathroom in Chicago today, realistically, if the product that they're getting is unique in terms of something that is a design that needs to come from the manufacturer, or new faucets that they want, or a bench that they need, those products can still be in that location inside of 48 to 72 hours and be installed in the same business week. That is a unique environment in the remodeling industry. I had my bathroom remodeled like 2 years ago. I swear the guy was there for 6 months. So, those are the things that we try to keep as a hallmark of our business. But in order to do that, you have to have a component of quality with all the components of speed. And
Yes.
and it goes back to the same factors.
I can imagine that's extremely complex to maintain that speed and that quality. How did you arrive at the 48-hour window? I mean, I imagine that is a huge differentiator for your business, and was probably a complex process to navigate in and of itself to actually get there. How did you set a goal for the team, and how did you work towards it?
Yeah, you're always looking at lead times from your suppliers. And so it was probably 2018 where our expansion was going kind of across the Mississippi. And we had a significant growth down in the southern United States and into Canada, where we realized, the speed component of the business was going to be bottlenecked by us if we didn't figure it out. And so Matt McKinney, who led our logistics team, and some of the folks in his group, they really kind of set out to create a dynamic distribution footprint. We had a distribution center here in Hudson, but we were largely shipping direct from manufacturer. And so over the course of that next really 2.5, 3 years, we built a network with some of our third-party warehouse vendors is what I'm trying to say. We built a network with them. And I think now we have 6 locations across the US and Canada. And it's really more of a hub and spoke movement of product. So you have inventory positions kind of at every level, and you're just funneling them to where it's needed. You know, by doing that, you're inflating your inventory. You're probably controlling more dollars than you would like. But our goal wasn't to, solve all of the world's problems. It was to get, product to our customers quickly. And so now, over the last several years, we're kind of going back and being editorial about that setup, but from all angles, right? So we know we have the speed component dialed in. Let's figure out how we can create some governors on the inventory position or the procurement processes or sourcing of new materials or even international shipping that helps continue to build efficiency in that.
And I'm sure the seasonality, that must impact your business. I imagine when the leaves are falling more, then that's changing,
Yeah.
the inventory needs. How do you forecast supply chain needs? I mean, given the seasonal fluctuations and any other seasonality or other aspects that impact your business?
I think it's more straightforward than you would imagine, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
Some of the other businesses, it's like when someone remodels their bathroom, 70% of the time they're going to choose white as the walls, right? So you take those factors in, and then you consider our scale and you consider the pull we have with some of our supply base. It's probably easier than I would make it sound, right? Nonetheless, yeah, the forecasting is, you got to have some viewpoints on the historical data. You got to have some expectations of future growth. You're doing all of the same sort of toolkitting in your forecasting that you would if you were forecasting yarn sales at Joann, right? It's getting harder, to be honest with you. I think the predictability of it is a little more difficult because of the volatility in the economy. Something as simple as the Fed rates are drastically affecting financing, right? And so, from that component, that's where we're going to see some of the ebb and flow of our inventory position. And we reforecast with our suppliers once a quarter. We make it known that we feel confident in the predictions. We're going to have to come back and make sure that we're continuing to review the near-term goals and the changing landscape in order to give them the best information possible.
Yeah, that's interesting and makes a lot of sense too, the way you've explained it. There are some things that we know for sure will happen, like fall will come, winter will come. These are regular elements, a part of the cycle. But then there are the other aspects that create that volatility that we don't always expect, like, changes in the economy, geopolitics, all of these things. When it comes to scaling your supply chain amidst in these possible disruptions and changes as they come, how do you set up your supply chain to be ready for scale and growth as maybe you're looking to bring on a new business or new product line or expand to new geographical area? How do you look to build out a supply chain that's ready to scale?
Yeah, I think you have to have an eye on technology, right? We've been hearing about generative AI for the last 18 months. Like everyone and their brother has a company that has some sort of generative AI solution for, everything you could possibly imagine. You have to be acknowledging that some of those things are coming, and that aids in the flexibility, right? I think one of the ways we build flexibility into our overall business is we kind of have redundancy in the location footprint. And so as we think about new product lines, as we think about even completely new businesses, we utilize that redundancy kind of uniquely when those situations come up. And frankly, there's just a lot of people out there that are partnering inside of these third-party companies that have every, positive inclination of supporting your business if you let them into it, right? And so I keep coming back to it. I think it's going to sound like a broken record on the show, but there is a people aspect to everything that we're doing that we do not discount. And so, yeah, we want to stay on the forefront of the technology and logistics and some of the things that are happening with customer deliveries, final mile companies coming up and being sort of the root of all the way that products move now. But we also need to have really good partnerships.
Well, as the leader of the supply chain for North America's largest home improvement company, I have to ask, do you have any tips or sneak peeks as to what are the latest trends? Where is this all going? What color should I paint my bathroom if not white?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be a great person to ask about that. You, what I will say is that I think that the material choices are becoming in all of the products in a home are becoming, I'll say, more diverse, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of economy coming into the equation in terms of new businesses, how they're starting up and how they're able to grow quickly. There's just a lot of focus on the home at this point. Whether you consider some of the recent news of new home construction figures and being down after over several years, or just the fact that aging in place is a real thing for a lot of homeowners now, there's just opportunity, right? And so, I mean, my advice would be to seek out that opportunity. And I think in a lot of respects that even with the tariffs, for instance, right, there's a lot of folks that are scrambling away from those situations. And I think we try to scramble to them to a degree.
Mhm.
We plan for those circumstances, but when they're happening, we think about the opportunity that's getting created because of them. And so, there's just that's probably flexibility and thought more than anything. That
Yeah.
just you don't pigeonhole yourself into a playbook that is based off of circumstance. I think you have to be thoughtful about the the climate that is out there and take advantage of it when you can.
And that's great advice for those that are leading supply chains and thinking about how do they take it to the next level. Would you add any other advice? And also maybe for those who are thinking about getting into the supply chain management career, like yourself, any advice for them?
Sure, yeah, I think one of the benefits that I feel like a role in supply chain offers you is visibility to the organization, right? You're oftentimes obviously on the forefront of acquiring products, and you're also on the back end of how the financials work and how it's impacting your costs. And you have to have an end-to-end mindset. And so that visibility is really invaluable in terms of how you acknowledge your position in the business, how you acknowledge the way the organization is performing and things that you can impact. So I know at Leaf, our group feels like we can impact a little bit of everything every day. And so we're mindful of that. And we try to get seats at all those tables when we can to positively at least provide perspective, right?
And I wanted to go back to something else that you had mentioned as well in regards to new materials in the supply chain and in like home materials, because that reminds me of sustainability. And sustainability is often a topic that we talk about because it really necessitates that we think about new technologies, new ways of doing businesses, new business partners and communities that we establish. So I wanted to ask you, what role does sustainability play either in, the supply chain at Leaf Home or in some of these materials that you're seeing, new to the market?
It's significant. I think, customers want to know that story. And so we think of it from a supply chain perspective as, okay, how can I have an understanding of my scopes and how can I minimize my impact on the environment or minimize the kind of full life of plastic products, right? I mean, plastics in and of itself has a bit of a negative connotation with regard to sustainability. I think we're doing our best to try and overcome that. We have lifetime warranties on a lot of our products, right? And so we create reverse logistics opportunities. We have very efficient manufacturing processes. So there's not a significant amount of waste. There's not a significant electrical component to it. And we try to tell that story, but also refine it. as we grow. And so the industries that we are kind of emerging in, whether it be bath or windows, some of those processes are decades old. Some of the material choices are more than decades old. And so we are trying to think uniquely about how we can disrupt those spaces in a positive way, whether it be material choice or cost or speed to customer or manufacturing style.
That's great. Well, gosh, as we wrap up, was there anything that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I think we're uniquely positioned to do some big things over the next few years, and we're very excited about it. I think our group as a whole feels a lot of responsibility to the organization to be prepared for the growth. And realistically, if you read the news wire every 10 minutes, there's something that is enough to be concerned about in terms of how it's going to affect your cost structure, your time. And so we try to be ahead of that, right? And I think it is a unique time frame to learn how to take advantage of all of these opportunities that exist. And so, grateful for the interest from you, and we're grateful for the opportunity to support a company like Leaf Home.
For sure. And it's so interesting because supply chain is changing so fast. There's always something new disrupting it. And the way organizations such as yours might have to respond and change and are thinking of new and innovative ways to confront them is just fascinating. And I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Well, it's such a great conversation. So glad to learn from your experience. For anybody who wants to learn more about Leaf Home or maybe to connect with you, Mike, where would you send them?
Our website is probably a great place to start. It's leafhome.com. A lot of our products are featured on there. I think we're still in the process of rebranding some of them. And ultimately, if you watch the TV long enough, you'll see commercials for us. So we'd love to hear from you if you're interested.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. Cheers.
All right. That was Mike Matisz, Vice President of Supply Chain at Leaf Home. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.